Ethan Carter slammed the truck door so hard the window rattled, then stood frozen in his own driveway, staring at the woman next door, who had just caught him red-handed. "You've been watching me for 3 weeks," Claire said, arms crossed, not angry, smiling. And a single father who swore he'd never love again suddenly had nowhere to hide. But here's what nobody in that quiet Denver suburb knew: the man Claire had really been running from was already driving into town. And he still had the key to her front door. If you're watching right now, do me a favor. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled tonight. And if you believe second chances are real, hit subscribe and stay with me till the very end. Ethan Carter had not laughed out loud in 3 years, and he was not planning to start on a Tuesday. He backed his pickup down the gravel drive at 5:40 in the morning, the way he did every morning. Coffee going cold in the cup holder, the radio off, because silence was easier than whatever they were playing. He didn't look at the empty seat beside him. He'd trained himself not to. 3 years was long enough to learn where not to look. "Dad?" Lily's voice came from the back, small and certain. "You forgot my lunch again." He hit the brake, closed his eyes, breathed. "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did. It's on the counter, next to the thing you always forget it next to." He put the truck in park in the middle of the driveway, and for a second, he just sat there, both hands on the wheel, 38 years old, and undone by a paper bag with a peanut butter sandwich in it. "Stay here," he said. "Don't touch the radio." "You never turn the radio on." "That's why I'm telling you not to touch it." He jogged back inside. The house was dark, and it smelled like the same coffee it always smelled like. And there on the counter next to the framed photo, he still couldn't move, was the lunch bag. He grabbed it. He did not look at the photo. He was very good at not looking at the photo. When he came back out, Lily had turned the radio on. "Lily!" "It was already broken silence," she said solemnly, which was a phrase her mother used to say. And Ethan's chest did the thing it always did, the tightening the door slamming shut on a room he wasn't allowed to walk into anymore. "Off," he said, gentler than he meant to. She turned it off. He handed her the lunch. And that was the morning. The same morning, the one he'd been living on a loop since the world ended. He was a contractor. He fixed things. He walked into other people's broken houses, and he made the doors hang straight and the floors stop creaking, and the water stopped leaking through their ceilings, and every one of those people looked at him like he was some kind of steady, dependable miracle. Ethan Carter. You can trust him with your keys. Ethan? He'll do it right. He always does it right. He fixed everybody's house. He just couldn't fix the one he lived in. The new neighbor moved in on a Saturday. He noticed because he noticed everything on his own street. It was the contractor in him. The way he could tell a house was settling wrong just by the sound the porch made. And the house next door had been empty for 8 months, quiet as his own, and now suddenly there was a moving truck and boxes and a woman in the driveway arguing cheerfully with 2 teenagers about which room got the good window. "Ma'am," one of the movers said, "where do you want the couch?" "Somewhere I can see the sunrise and pretend I'm the kind of person who gets up for it," she said, and laughed at her own joke, loud, unembarrassed. And Ethan, standing in his own yard, pretending to check his gutters, flinched at the sound. Not because it was unpleasant, because he couldn't remember the last time he'd heard laughter that wasn't performing for somebody. "Dad!" Lily was beside him. "Where'd she come from?" "We have a new neighbor." "Looks like it." "She has a trampoline. It's still in the box, but I saw the box." "Don't go over there." "Why?" Because Ethan thought. Because I don't do this anymore. Because the last time I let somebody into this house, they left a hole in it the exact shape of them, and I'm still walking around it 3 years later. Because I have a daughter and a business and a life that fits in a box the size of a lunch bag, and I am not going to complicate it for a woman with a trampoline. Because I said so, is what he said out loud. Lily looked up at him with her mother's eyes and did not argue, which was worse than if she had. Her name was Claire Morgan. He learned it the way you learn things in a neighborhood in pieces secondhand without meaning to. She was a physical therapist. She'd come from the city. There'd been a divorce. Mrs. Alvarez, 3 doors down, had gotten that much out of her at the mailbox and reported it to the whole street like breaking news. Divorced. No kids of her own, but she was great with them. You should see her with the Alvarez grandkids. Painted her furniture out in the driveway. Played music while she gardened. Waved at everyone. She waved at Ethan. He nodded. That was the deal he made with himself. A nod was polite. A nod was neighborly. A nod cost nothing and promised nothing. She waved again the next day. He nodded again. By the second week, she stopped waving and just watched him. This little half smile on her face like she'd figured out a puzzle and was too kind to say the answer out loud. It made him nervous in a way he hadn't been nervous in years. He started timing his trips to the truck for when her car was gone. He started fixing things on the far side of his house. He told himself it was because he was a private man. It was not because he was a private man. Every Saturday she sat out in her backyard. He knew this because, and he would have denied it under oath, his eyes kept finding their way over the fence. She'd stretch out in one of those cheap folding chairs with a paperback and a glass of iced tea, and her face turned up to the sun like she was daring it to do something about her, and Ethan would be out in his own yard with a hammer in his hand and no earthly reason to be using it, and he'd look. He wasn't looking at her exactly. That's what he told himself, and it was almost true. He was looking at the way a person could just sit there, be happy, take up space in the world and not apologize for it. He'd forgotten a person could do that. He'd forgotten he used to do that. "You know," Claire said one Saturday without turning her head, without opening her eyes, "for a man who fixes houses for a living, you sure do struggle with that fence." Ethan froze. He'd been standing at the fence line, for he checked his own internal clock, a long time. Too long. Holding a board he had no plan for. He started. "You've been fixing that same fence post for 20 minutes. She turned her head, now opened one eye, that half smile back in full. "It's a good post, solid. I'd stop before you fix it to death." And here is the thing that surprised Ethan Carter more than anything had surprised him in 3 years. He laughed. It came out of him rough and rusty like a machine that hadn't been run in a season, and it startled them both. He clapped a hand over his own mouth like he'd said something wrong. Claire sat up in her chair. "Well," she said quietly, "there he is. I don't—" He cleared his throat. The post was leaning. It was not leaning. It was leaning a little. Ethan. First time she'd said his name, it did something to him he did not authorize. "It's okay to be a person. I won't tell anybody." He didn't know how she knew his name. He didn't ask. He stood there with the board in his hand, this 40-something square-shouldered man who could reframe a load-bearing wall in his sleep, completely disarmed by a woman in a lawn chair. "I should get back," he said, "to the fence. To my daughter. Your daughter's at the Alvarez house. She and the grandkids have been jumping on my trampoline for an hour." Claire tilted her head. "I set it up. I hope that's okay. She asked so nicely I couldn't say no. She said, and I quote, 'My dad said I couldn't come over, but he didn't say I couldn't ask.'" Ethan closed his eyes. "That sounds like her. She's a good kid. She's got—" Claire stopped herself. Something crossed her face. Careful, deliberate, the look of a woman who knew exactly how much a wrong word could weigh. "She's got a lot of heart, that one. Doesn't get that from nowhere." And Ethan understood in that second that she knew. About his wife. About the hole in the house. Somebody had told her Mrs. Alvarez, the mailbox committee somebody, and instead of the pity face, the head tilt, the "oh you poor thing" he'd been dodging for 3 years, this woman had just made it lighter. Set up a trampoline. Let his kid be a kid. "Thank you," he said, and meant more than the trampoline. Anytime neighbor. He told himself that was the end of it. A funny thing over a fence. Neighbors had funny things over fences. It didn't mean anything. Then she showed up at his door with a plate of cookies and ruined everything. "I don't cook," she announced when he opened the door, thrusting the plate at him. "I want to be clear about that up front, so you don't get ideas. These are from a tube. I bought the tube. I cut the tube. I put the tube circles on a pan. That's the whole story. But it felt weird to move in next to somebody and not bring something, and my mother would rise up out of the ground if I showed up empty-handed, so. She pushed the plate another inch toward him. Tube cookies. You're welcome. Or I'm sorry. One of those. Ethan looked at the plate. Looked at her. Looked back at the plate. You didn't have to. I know I didn't have to. That's what makes it a nice gesture, and not a hostage situation. She peered past him into the house. Is your daughter home? I have extra. Kids like tube cookies. Kids like anything that's technically dessert. Lily, he called before he decided to. Come here. Lily came thundering down the stairs and stopped dead at the sight of Claire, and her whole face opened up like a window. You're the trampoline lady. I am the trampoline lady, Claire agreed gravely. It's my finest title. Cookie. Lily looked at her father. Ethan hesitated one full second, and he'd remember it later that second, because it was the last one where he could have shut the door and gone back to his loop, back to his lunch bag and his silence and his room. He wasn't allowed to enter, and then he nodded. 1, he said. Lily took 3. Claire pretended not to notice, and Ethan Carter stood in his own doorway watching his daughter laugh with a woman he'd known for 2 weeks, and felt the door to that room he'd sealed shut swing open just a crack, just enough to let the light in, and it terrified him more than any collapsing roof he'd ever stood under. It became a rhythm after that, the way things do. Small at first. She left the porch light on for him when he worked late so he wouldn't come home to a dark street. He noticed her steps were rotting. Actually, rotting a safety hazard, the kind of thing that made his contractor brain itch, and he replaced them. One Sunday, without asking, just showed up with lumber, and when she came out and found him there, she didn't thank him, which he appreciated. She just brought him a glass of iced tea and sat on the good part of the steps and talked to him while he worked. That's when he started learning who she actually was. So, she said, watching him drive a screw. How long? How long what? How long has it been since your wife? He didn't stop working. It was easier not to stop working. 3 years. Was it fast or slow? Nobody asked it like that. Everybody asked what happened, or worse, how are you holding up? And he'd learned 100 ways to say fine without meaning it. But fast or slow, that was a different question. That was the question of somebody who understood there were 2 kinds of losing. Fast, he said. Car. She went to the store. She didn't. He set the drill down, picked it back up. She just went to the store. Claire didn't say she was sorry. She didn't reach for him. She just nodded slow, like she was filing it somewhere careful. Mine was slow, she said. The kind where you don't even notice it happening. The kind where you look up one day and you can't remember the last time you had an opinion about anything because you'd stopped having them out loud. She wrapped both hands around her tea. His name was Marcus. He is a very successful man. Everyone loved him. That was part of the trick of it. How could I be unhappy? Look at what he gave me. Look at how he provided. She said the word like it tasted wrong. It took me 11 years to figure out that the difference between being cared for and being controlled is whether you're allowed to say no. Ethan stopped working then. He hurt you. His voice had gone low. Not the way you mean. She met his eyes. Which is why it took me 11 years. If he'd ever hit me, I'd have been gone in a week. I'm not a stupid woman. Whatever I've done, I'm not stupid. But he never raised a hand. He just raised a wall. 1 brick at a time. My job gone because it stressed me out. My friends gone because they were a bad influence. My clothes, my hair, the way I laughed too loud at dinner parties. All of it slowly 1 brick at a time, until one day I looked in the mirror and I couldn't find myself in it. She smiled, but it didn't reach anywhere. The laughing was the last thing to go. He hated my laugh, said it was embarrassing, said I sounded unhinged. Ethan thought about the first day she'd moved in. Somewhere I can see the sunrise and pretend I'm the kind of person who gets up for it. That laugh, loud and unashamed, that had made him flinch in his own yard. I like your laugh, he said. It came out before he could stop it. Claire went very still. That's a dangerous thing to say to a woman like me, Ethan. Why? Because I've spent 2 years teaching myself to laugh out loud again, just to spite him. And you're the first person who's ever heard it and liked it. She looked down at her tea. I don't know what to do with that. I honestly don't. He didn't either. So he picked the drill back up, and she stayed on the good part of the steps, and neither of them said anything for a while, and it was the least lonely silence he'd sat in since the world ended. The kids sealed it. Lily and the Alvarez grandkids, and increasingly just Lily and Claire, because it turned out Claire had a gift for exactly the kind of thing an 8-year-old needed, and a grief-flattened father kept forgetting existed. Claire helped with the volcano project for the science fair. Claire knew how to French braid. Claire could answer the questions Lily had stopped asking her father because they made his face go strange. Claire, Lily said one afternoon at Claire's kitchen table, glitter everywhere. Did you know my mom? Ethan in the doorway with a toolbox froze. Claire didn't freeze. Claire didn't even look up from the poster board. I didn't, sweetheart. I wish I had. What was she like? And Lily, who never talked about her mother, who had built the same wall her father built, brick for brick, started talking. About the songs her mom sang. About how she made pancakes in shapes. About the perfume and the laugh, and the way she'd dance in the kitchen. Talking and talking, glitter on her hands, and Ethan stood in the doorway with the toolbox getting heavy in his grip, and tears he refused to let fall standing in his eyes, because his daughter was telling somebody about her mother, and the world hadn't ended a second time. Claire caught his eye over the top of Lily's head. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once. I've got her. It's okay. I've got her. That was the night Ethan Carter admitted to himself alone in his kitchen at midnight, staring at the photo he still couldn't move, that he was in trouble. The good kind, the terrifying kind, the kind he'd promised he'd never let happen again. I'm sorry, he told the photo, out loud, for the first time. I think I'm going to try to be happy again. I don't know how to ask you if that's okay. The photo didn't answer. But for the first time in 3 years, the silence in the house didn't feel like a punishment. He should have known it was too good. Men like Ethan always knew somewhere in the back of the skull that when things got warm, they were about to get taken away. It was the whole architecture of grief, the flinch built into the good moments. He should have known. He found out on a Thursday. He was on Claire's newly repaired steps drinking her iced tea, listening to her tell a story about a patient, when a black car, expensive, silent, the kind of car that cost more than Ethan's truck and his tools and probably his house, rolled to a stop at the curb and just sat there, engine running, waiting. Claire stopped mid-sentence. Ethan watched the color drain out of her face like someone had pulled a plug. Claire. Go home, Ethan. What? Please. Her voice had changed, completely smaller, older, the voice of the woman she'd described, the one who couldn't find herself in the mirror. Please just go home, now. The car door opened. The man who got out was everything she'd said. Tall, handsome, an easy, expensive smile, a coat that probably cost a month of Ethan's income. He moved like the sidewalk belonged to him, like the whole street belonged to him, like Claire belonged to him. There she is. Marcus Reed said warmly, spreading his arms, and even his voice was expensive. There's my girl. You are a hard woman to find, you know that. Do you have any idea how many favors I called into? His eyes landed on Ethan, on the toolbox, on the work boots and the sawdust and the iced tea. Something in the smile shifted, sharpened. And who's this? Ethan stood up, slow. He was not a small man, and he made sure Marcus registered it, though he kept his voice flat and easy. I'm the neighbor. I was fixing her steps. Marcus looked him up and down, and then he laughed, a light, delighted, genuinely amused laugh, the laugh of a man who has just been handed something he finds charming. The neighbor. He turned to Claire, gesturing at Ethan like he was showing her a funny sign on the highway. Sweetheart, is this a construction guy? Is this what we're doing now? He said construction guy, the way another man might say a slur. God. Okay, I get it. You wanted to make a point. Fair. You made it. It's very... He flapped a hand at Ethan, earthy. Now, get your things. We're going to dinner, and we're going to talk like adults. And here is the moment. Here is the moment Ethan would think about for a long time after. He waited for Claire to say no. He wanted her to say no. Every cell in him was leaning toward her, willing it say no. Claire, you're allowed to say no. That's the whole thing. That's the only thing. Say it. And Claire opened her mouth, and nothing came out. 11 years of bricks. 2 years of teaching herself to laugh again. And here was the man who'd taught her not to standing on her lawn in a coat that cost a month of Ethan's life, and she stood there with her mouth open and nothing came out. And Ethan watched the woman who'd handed him back his own daughter shrink down to nothing in real time. Claire, Ethan said quietly. She didn't look at him. Claire? Marcus's voice had an edge, now patient, the way a knife is patient. Don't make this a thing. Get in the car. You've had your little adventure. The house was cute. The whole... He waved at the street, the neighbors, the trampoline. Little house on the prairie thing was cute. But you're coming home and you know you're coming home, so let's not do this in front of the help. The word landed in the yard like something dead. And Ethan Carter, who fixed everybody's houses, who never asked anyone for anything, who'd built a whole quiet life out of not making trouble, took one step forward. Just one. She said she's staying. Marcus turned delighted all over again. She didn't say anything. That's rather the point, isn't it? She never says anything. That's how I know she's mine. She's not yours. Excuse me. You heard me. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He'd learned a long time ago that the men who raised their voices were the ones who didn't have anything behind them. He kept his low and level and absolutely certain. She's not a car. She's not a house. She's not yours. And she's staying. For one long second, the two men just looked at each other across the small suburban lawn, and everything hung in the balance. The whole street seemed to hold its breath. Mrs. Alvarez frozen at her window, the kids gone quiet on the trampoline. Then Marcus smiled again. And this smile was the worst one yet, because it wasn't angry at all. It was pleased. Oh, he said softly. Oh, you care about her. That's... He actually laughed, delighted, cruel. That's wonderful. That's the best thing that's happened to me all week. He turned to Claire, who still hadn't moved, who still hadn't spoken. Sweetheart, does he know? Does the neighbor know why you really left? Does he know what you did? Claire made a sound small, broken the sound of a wall starting to come down. Marcus, don't. Does he know? Marcus went on, gentle as poison, that you're not the innocent little bird you're playing? Because I think if the neighbor knew the whole story, he might not be so quick to plant his little flag. He looked back at Ethan, and his eyes were bright with something that made Ethan's stomach turn. Ask her, construction guy. Ask her what she's not telling you. And when you can't stand to look at her anymore... He took a card out of his coat, one of those thick, expensive cards, and flicked it into the grass at Ethan's feet. She knows my number. She always comes back. Don't you, sweetheart? He got in his car. He didn't slam the door. Men like Marcus never slam doors. He closed it soft, the way you close a thing you're sure you can open again whenever you want, and the black car pulled away silent as it came, and the street let out its breath. And Ethan turned to Claire, his heart still going, the adrenaline still up, ready to tell her, it's okay, he's gone. You don't have to be afraid, I've got you the way you had. Lily, and Claire was already backing toward her door. You should go home, she whispered. Claire, please. Her hand found the doorknob behind her without looking. Her eyes were wet and wide and full of something he couldn't name yet, something that looked a lot like the thing he saw in his own mirror. He's right. There's things you don't know. There's a reason I left the way I left. And you've been so... Her voice cracked clean in half. You've been so kind, and Lily's been so, and I can't. I can't let you plant a flag in me, Ethan. I'm not solid ground. You fix houses. You don't want a house like me. I'm the kind you tear down. Claire, whatever it is, Go home. And this time it came out sharp, came out like a slammed door, even though her hands were shaking, and she was inside before he could answer, and the deadbolt turned, and the porch light, the one she left on for him every night, clicked off. Ethan stood in her yard in the dark. He looked down at the card in the grass. He didn't pick it up. He looked at the dark window, the locked door, the porch light gone out for the first time since she'd moved in. And he understood, standing there, that he had a choice to make. The same choice he'd been avoiding for 3 years, the one that had kept him in his loop, kept the photo where it was kept, the room sealed shut. He could go home. He could go back to the lunch bags and the silence, and the safe, small, unbreakable life where nobody could leave him because he never let anybody in. That door was right there. It was always right there. It was the easiest door in the world to walk through, or he could do the thing he swore he'd never do again. He could fight for something. Ethan bent down. He picked up Marcus Reed's card out of the wet grass. He looked at it for a long moment, the thick paper, the gold lettering, the phone number of the man who thought people were things you could own. Then he tore it in half, and in half again, and he let the pieces fall. She's staying, he said to nobody, to the dark window, to himself. She's staying, and she's not a house I'm tearing down, and I don't scare that easy anymore. He walked back to his own yard. But before he went inside, he did one more thing. He reached up under the eave of Claire's porch, found the switch he'd wired himself when he built those steps, and he turned her porch light back on. Let her wake up to it, he thought. Let her know somebody left a light on for her for once. Let her know that whatever she thinks she did, whatever Marcus thinks he still owns, there's a man next door who fixes broken things for a living, and he's not going anywhere. Inside his own dark house, Lily was asleep. Ethan stood in the kitchen and looked finally straight at the photo on the counter. His wife's face. 3 years of not looking, and now he looked, and he didn't feel the door slam shut. I need to help her, he told the photo. I don't know the whole story yet, but I know a person who's drowning when I see one. You'd want me to help her. You'd have already been over there. The photo smiled at him the way it always did, frozen and kind. And for the first time since the world ended, Ethan Carter felt something that wasn't grief and wasn't fear. He felt ready. The porch light stayed on all night, and Claire Morgan didn't sleep at all. She sat on her kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, knees pulled up to her chest, and she watched the light bleed through the window over her sink until the sky went gray. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, she'd realized the light meant Ethan had turned it back on after she'd shut it off, which meant he'd stood in her yard after she'd locked him out, which meant he wasn't scared off, which meant she was going to have to do the hardest thing she'd done in 2 years. She was going to have to tell him the truth, or she was going to have to run again. And Claire was so tired of running. At 6:15, she heard his truck door open next door. She was on her feet before she'd decided to be at her own front door, before she'd talked herself out of it. And then she was standing on her porch in yesterday's clothes, with her hair a wreck, and Ethan was in his driveway, with his coffee going cold. And they just looked at each other across the strip of grass between 2 houses that had somehow become one conversation. You turned my light back on, she said. You noticed. I noticed. Then it worked. He set the coffee on the hood of his truck. He didn't come closer. She noticed that too, that he stayed on his side, that he was giving her the space to close the distance or not, and something about that undid her more than if he'd rushed over. Ethan, about last night. You don't have to explain. I do, though. That's the whole problem. I do have to explain, and I don't want to, and if I don't, you're going to make up something kinder than the truth in your head. Because that's what you do. You make broken things sound fixable. Her voice was shaking. And I can't stand for you to look at me the way you look at me right now, and then have it change. So I'd rather just tell you, and get it over with, and let you decide. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he did the thing she didn't expect. He picked his coffee back up, walked to the strip of grass between their houses, sat down right in the middle of it, and looked up at her. Then come tell me, he said. I've got nowhere to be till 8. And that stupid, quiet, impossible kindness. A grown man sitting down in the grass between 2 houses like a kid, so she wouldn't have to feel loomed over. That was what got her down off the porch. She sat across from him in the wet grass. Her patients would have been horrified. She didn't care. "His name is Marcus Reed," she said. "You met him. You know that part. What you don't know is that I didn't just leave him. I took something when I left." Ethan didn't move. "Okay. I want you to let me finish before you say anything. Can you do that?" "I can do that." "Do." She pulled a breath all the way down. "Marcus is a developer. Real estate. The expensive kind, the kind that turns neighborhoods like this one into things that used to be neighborhoods like this one. And about 3 years ago, he got involved in a project, a big one, low-income housing. The city put up a lot of money for it. Public money. And I did his books. Not officially. Officially, he had accountants and lawyers and a whole floor of people. But at home, at night on the laptop, I did the real books, the ones the other ones were based on. Because he trusted me, and he didn't trust them, and being trusted by Marcus felt at the time like the only currency I had. Ethan's jaw had gone tight. He didn't say anything. He'd promised he wouldn't. He stole from it, Claire said. The housing project, millions. He moved money in circles until it disappeared into things that had his name buried, 6 shells deep. And the housing got built worse and smaller and later than it was supposed to. And I watched him do it, and for a long time I told myself I didn't understand what I was looking at. That's the thing about being trained not to have opinions. You get very good at not understanding things it would hurt to understand. The porch light was still on behind her, useless in the morning sun, and she stared at it instead of at him. When I finally left, I didn't just pack a bag. I copied everything. Every real ledger, every transfer, every shell. I put it all on a drive and I took it, because some part of me knew that walking out the door wasn't going to be enough, that a man like Marcus doesn't let you leave. He lets you think you've left, and then he reels you back in, and the only way I was ever going to be free was if I had something. A reason for him to leave me alone. She finally looked at Ethan. That's what he wants back, not me. He'll tell you it's me, he'll do the whole sweetheart come home routine, but Marcus doesn't want a person. Marcus wants that drive, because if it ever sees daylight, he doesn't lose a wife. He loses everything. He goes to prison, Ethan, for a long time. She waited for it. The change. The recalculation behind his eyes the moment a decent man realized he'd been leaving his porch light on for a woman who was an accessory to a crime. A woman with a felon's evidence in a shoebox. A woman who came with a black car that would keep coming back. Ethan set his coffee down in the grass. "Where's the drive now?" he asked. She blinked. "That's your question?" "That's my question." "It's in my house, in a fireproof box, in the closet." "Why?" "Because," Ethan said slowly, "if that thing is what he wants, then that thing is the most dangerous object in this zip code, and it's sitting 40 feet from my daughter's bedroom. So yeah, that's my question." He rubbed a hand down his face. "You said let you finish before I say anything. You finished." She hadn't expected to get this far. "Yes, then here's what I've got." He leaned forward, forearms on his knees, and he looked at her with those steady contractor's eyes that had assessed 1,000 broken things and figured out which ones were worth saving. "You keep saying you took something. You keep saying it like it's a crime. Claire, you didn't rob a man. You documented one. There's a word for a person who copies the evidence of a crime and holds on to it, and it's not thief. It's witness." Claire's eyes filled so fast it startled her. "You don't understand. I understand you've spent 2 years thinking the drive makes you dirty, when the drive is the cleanest thing you own." He said it plainly, like a fact about a foundation load-bearing or not. The question was never whether you did something wrong by taking it. The question is what you're going to do with it. And you've been sitting on it for 2 years, scared to answer that because answering it means the black car shows up, which it just did. Which means the sitting still plan is over whether you like it or not. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, furious at herself, furious at how much she'd needed someone to say it that way plain without the pity. "You're not running," she said. "You're supposed to be running. A smart man would be running. I fixed everybody's house in this town except my own for 3 years because running was all I knew how to do." Ethan's voice roughened. "I'm done running, And I'll be damned if I'm going to watch you do it when you're the bravest coward I've ever met." She laughed, then wet and startled and loud. That laugh, the one Marcus hated, and Ethan smiled at it the way he always did, and for 1 second in the grass between two houses, everything was almost okay. Then his phone buzzed, and hers, at the same time. They both looked down. It was a text from a number neither of them had saved, and it said the same thing on both their screens. "Nice light. Cozy street. Would be a shame." Ethan was on his feet before Claire had finished reading it, and the almost okay was gone like it had never been there at all. The morning after that felt to Claire like walking on a floor she couldn't trust. Marcus had both their numbers, which meant Marcus had watched them long enough to get both their numbers, which meant the black car pulling up hadn't been Marcus finding her. It had been Marcus arriving on a schedule after who knew how long of watching. She kept catching herself looking at parked cars. She kept the drive's fireproof box in her line of sight, like it might get up and walk away. Ethan did the thing Ethan did with fear, which was to turn it into a task list. "First," he said, standing in her living room with Lily safely dropped at school and the doors locked, "that drive doesn't stay in a shoebox in a closet. That's not a plan, that's a prayer. Where's it supposed to go? Copies, plural. One with a lawyer sealed. One in a bank box. One somewhere he'd never think to look that isn't a house he can burn down." He was pacing, and it wasn't nervous. Pacing, it was the pacing of a man walking a job site, seeing the load paths. Right now, it's one object, and he knows it's one object, and as long as it's one object, getting it back solves his problem. The second there's 5 of them, and one's with a lawyer taking it from you, doesn't fix anything. It just adds a felony. We make the drive worthless to steal. Then he's got no reason to come. You've thought about this a lot for a man who found out an hour ago. I think about foundations for a living. Same thing. You find the thing holding the weight, and you either reinforce it or you take the weight off it. He stopped pacing. "Second thing, and you're not going to like it. I already don't like any of it. You need a lawyer. A real one. Not to sue him. To go to the people who care about $11 million of public money disappearing." He watched her face fold. "Claire, if I do that, it stops being something I'm holding for protection and becomes something I did. I become the woman who turned in the man everybody loves. I become part of a story with my name in it forever. And Ethan, I did the books. Do you understand? I typed the numbers. There is a version of this where I'm not the witness. There's a version where I'm the one who goes to prison." Ethan came and sat down across from her. Close this time, no strip of grass between them. "Then we find out which version it is," he said, "from somebody who knows the difference, instead of you deciding you're guilty by yourself in a closet for 2 more years. He took her hand. First time. Her fingers were freezing. "You don't have to walk into a police station today, but you have to talk to somebody who can tell you where the line is. Because right now you're guessing, and you're guessing yourself into the worst version, and that's not the same as the truth." Claire looked down at his hand around hers, this rough, warm, calloused hand that fixed things, and she thought about how long it had been since she'd let anyone hold anything of hers. "Okay," she whispered. "A lawyer. One conversation. One conversation. And if it turns out I go to prison, you have to promise me you'll tell Lily I was a good neighbor. You're not going to prison. Promise me anyway." Ethan squeezed her hand. "You were the best neighbor," he said, "and you set up the trampoline, and you knew how to French braid, and my daughter told you about her mother. That's what I'll tell her. But you're not going to prison, so it won't come up." Claire didn't cry that time. She'd cried enough. But something in her chest that had been clenched for 2 years let go by a single notch, and for the first time she believed, not hoped, believed that she might actually get out. Which is exactly when the mistakes people make in stories like this one begin. Because Claire, who had spent 11 years learning to swallow every opinion, felt the first taste of solid ground under her, and decided she wanted to stand on it. She made the lawyer appointment. Then, that same afternoon, while Ethan was on a job site, and Lily was at school, and the house was too quiet. She did the thing she absolutely should not have done. She called Marcus back, not to go back. She'd swear that to Ethan later, and it would be true. She called because 2 years of running had built up a pressure in her, a need to stand in front of the man one time as the person she'd become, instead of the person she'd been, to say the words out loud that she'd only ever said in the mirror. She called to tell him she wasn't afraid of him anymore. He answered on the first ring. "Sweetheart." He said, warm, like they hadn't stood on a lawn 12 hours ago. "I knew you'd call. You always call." "I'm not coming back, Marcus." "Of course you're not. Not right away. You've got a whole rebellion to finish, I understand." She could hear him smiling. "The little house. The little construction boyfriend. It's very nourishing, I'm sure. Get it out of your system. I'm not calling to negotiate. I'm calling to tell you I'm done. The drive stays with me, and if you ever come near that street again, near that man or his daughter, it goes to people who'll know what to do with it. That's it. That's the whole call." There was a silence on the line. And in that silence, Claire heard for the first time in 2 years the real Marcus, not the charming one, not the warm one, but the flat, cold one underneath the one who'd built the walls brick by brick. "You think you're threatening me?" he said. "That's adorable. Let me tell you what you actually just did. You just confirmed you still have it. You just told me it's on that street. And you just told me you care about the man and the little girl." He let each piece land. "I didn't know any of that for sure, Claire. I was guessing. You just filled in the whole map for me. Thank you." The floor dropped out of Claire's stomach. "Marcus, no, it's fine. This is good. This is much simpler now." His voice was almost gentle. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to bring me the drive, all of it, every copy, and don't insult me by pretending you haven't been told to make copies, because that construction fellow has the look of a man who makes copies. You're going to bring me everything, and in exchange, nothing happens to a very cute little house on a very quiet street. Do we understand each other?" Claire's hand was shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone. "You wouldn't." "I wouldn't what, sweetheart? I haven't said a single specific thing. I said it'd be a shame. I said the house is cute. A jury would call that concern for a neighbor." She could hear the smile come back worse now. "You have until Friday. And Claire, don't tell the boyfriend. Because the version of this where he gets involved is a version where a lot more people get hurt, and you'll have chosen it. You've always been so good at choosing the thing that hurts everyone. Ask your first husband." "Oh, wait." Claire hung up. She stood in her too quiet living room with the phone in her hand and the fireproof box in the closet, and the porch light Ethan had turned back on, and she understood, with a sick and total clarity, that she had just made everything so much worse. She'd walked out onto the solid ground he'd given her, and she'd immediately used it to do the one reckless thing that put his house and his daughter in the crosshairs of the man she'd spent 2 years learning to escape. And now Marcus had a deadline, and a threat, and her whole map. She had 2 choices. Tell Ethan and watch him walk straight into a war. A man like Marcus would win, because Marcus won every war he could turn into a legal document. Or don't tell Ethan, handle it herself. Protect the house and the little girl. The only way that guaranteed their safety: give Marcus the drive, disappear from the street, and let Ethan think she was just another person who left. She knew which one Marcus wanted her to pick. He'd told her. Don't tell the boyfriend. Which is exactly why she almost picked it. She got as far as pulling the fireproof box out of the closet. She got as far as setting it on the kitchen table. She got as far as opening it and looking at the little black drive that held $11 million and her freedom and Ethan's safety all at once. And then she looked up out the window at the strip of grass where a man had sat down so she wouldn't feel loomed over, and she heard his voice in her head. "You're the bravest coward I've ever met." And she closed the box. "No," she said out loud to the empty house. "Not this time. Not alone." She was reaching for her phone to call Ethan when the doorbell rang. It wasn't Ethan. Ethan didn't ring. He knocked twice low. This was the bell. And when Claire looked through the window, her heart climbed straight into her throat because it wasn't Marcus either. It was a woman she'd never seen in a good coat holding a leather folder with the specific patient stillness of someone who'd been sent. "Ms. Morgan," the woman said through the door. "My name is Diane Foss. I work for Mr. Reed. I'm not here to frighten you. I'm here to make your life easier." She held up the folder to the window and Claire could see it was full of papers. "May I come in? I'd rather not do this on the porch. Your neighbors seem observant." Claire did not open the door. "Whatever it is, put it in writing and mail it." "It is in writing. That's what I'm holding." Diane's voice was calm, professional, almost kind, which was somehow worse than a threat. "Mr. Reed has authorized me to offer you a settlement, a generous one, in exchange for the return of certain property and a signed agreement about certain events. There's a number in here, Ms. Morgan, and it's the kind of number that lets a person start over anywhere. New city, new name if you wanted. Far from all of this." A pause. "Far from anyone it might otherwise touch." The threat inside the offer was so smooth, Claire almost missed it. Anyone it might otherwise touch. "I have a lawyer," Claire said, and was proud of how steady it came out. "Everything goes through my lawyer." The stillness on the other side of the door changed, just slightly. Claire had spent 11 years reading the smallest changes in a controlling man's people, and she read this one. Diane Foss had not expected the word lawyer. "You retained counsel," Diane said. "This morning." That was fast. "I had help." There was a silence. Then Diane Foss slid a card under the door, not thick and gold like Marcus's, just a plain business card, and said in a different voice, a voice that didn't sound like it was performing for Marcus anymore. "Ms. Morgan, off the record, woman to woman. If you have counsel, and if you have what he thinks you have, then you don't need the settlement, and you should not sign the settlement, and you should tell your lawyer that Mr. Reed sent someone to your home 3 days after making telephone contact, because that pattern has a name, and it isn't a good one for him." A pause. "I've worked for that man for 6 years. I'm telling you this once and I'll deny I said it. Get it to the right people fast. He's already decided he can't let you keep it. And when Marcus decides he can't let you keep something," she didn't finish. She didn't have to. Claire heard heels on the porch steps, then a car door, then nothing. She stood frozen in her living room for a full minute. Then she snatched up the plain card and her phone and called Ethan, and when he answered, she didn't say hello. "I did something stupid, and I have to tell you all of it," she said, "and there's a deadline and there's a woman, and I need you to not walk into a war, and I need you here, and I'm so sorry, and please come home." There was the briefest pause on the line. Then in the voice she was coming to lean on like a wall she trusted. "I'm already in the truck," Ethan said. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anybody. Talk to me while I drive." And she did. She told him about the call, the mistake, the map she'd handed Marcus, the deadline Friday. The woman named Diane, the settlement, the plain card, the warning. She told him all of it fast in a rush, waiting the whole time for him to be angry, for him to tell her she'd ruined it for the recalculation. It didn't come. "Okay," Ethan said when she finished, and she could hear the truck taking the corner too fast. "Okay, here's the good news, and I need you to hear it as good news. You just got a witness." "What?" "Diane. 6 years working for him. She just warned you on your porch that he sent her 3 days after making contact. You said she said it had a name." His voice was moving fast now, sharp, the contractor seeing the whole structure at once. "That's not a woman who's loyal to Marcus. That's a woman looking for a lifeboat. People who work for men like that spend years telling themselves they're not part of it, right up until they realize they're the one holding the folder at the door. You just watched her realize it." A beat. "We don't just have the drive anymore, Claire. We might have her." Claire pressed her hand to her mouth. She hadn't seen it. She'd been so deep in her own guilt, she'd seen a threat where Ethan, one phone call later, had already seen a crack in Marcus's wall. "You're not mad," she said. "I'm furious, but not at you." The truck door slammed on his end. He was home. She could hear his boots on his own driveway. "You called him because 2 years of running builds up in a person, and it had to go somewhere. I get it. I spent 3 years fixing other people's houses because my grief had to go somewhere. People who've been made small don't get to skip the part where they overcorrect. You made a mistake. It's not the end of anything. It's just where the real fight starts." He knocked twice on her door low. She'd never crossed a room so fast in her life. She opened it, and there he was, and she didn't decide to. She just stepped straight into him and Ethan Carter, who hadn't held anyone but his daughter in 3 years. Wrapped both arms around her and held on like a man bracing a wall, and for a second the deadline and the drive and the black car all went quiet. "Friday," she said into his shoulder. He said Friday. "Then we've got till Friday to make that drive worthless to steal and make Diane Foss the best decision she ever made." He pulled back enough to look at her. "Where's the box?" "Kitchen table." "Good. First we make copies. Then we call your lawyer back and tell her the deadline moved things up. Then—" He stopped and something crossed his face, and Claire saw him do the math on the one variable that mattered more than any of it. "Lily," she said. "Lily." His jaw tightened. "He knows about her. He said the house. He means her." Ethan pulled out his phone, and for the first time since the black car, Claire saw real fear on his face. Not for himself, not even for her, but the particular bottomless fear of a man who has already lost one family. "I'm getting her from school myself. Right now, she stays with us. Both houses locked. Nobody's alone." He was dialing the school before he'd finished the sentence, and Claire watched him become in real time the thing Marcus had never once been in, 11 years a man who ran toward the person he was scared for. The school secretary answered. Ethan asked for Lily to be ready for early pickup. There was a pause on the line, the ordinary bureaucratic pause of someone checking a screen, and then the secretary said the words that stopped Claire's heart and dropped Ethan's phone half an inch from his ear. "Oh, Mr. Carter, she's already gone. Your wife picked her up 20 minutes ago. The tall gentleman said you'd sent them. He had the pickup password and everything." The room went absolutely silent. Ethan's face didn't crumble. That was the thing Claire would remember. It went the other way. It went still, and flat and terrifyingly calm, the calm of a man who has just been handed the exact shape of his worst nightmare, and has decided in a single breath that it is not going to happen twice. "What password?" he said, and his voice was very quiet. The family word, it's in the system. He knew it. He said, "Butterfly pancakes. That's the—" Claire watched the blood leave Ethan's face because she knew where that word came from. She'd heard Lily say it at her own kitchen table with glitter on her hands. "My mom made pancakes in shapes. It was a dead woman's pancakes. It was the most private, most tender thing in that little girl's whole broken heart, and Marcus had it, which meant Marcus had been listening to that street, that kitchen, that child for so much longer, and so much closer than either of them had ever imagined." Ethan lowered the phone. He looked at Claire, and Claire looked back at him. And in the space between them, the whole thing changed shape. It wasn't about a drive anymore. It wasn't about $11 million, or public housing, or a settlement in a leather folder. It was about an 8-year-old girl in a black car, and two people who had spent years being small and safe and alone, and the exact moment they both stopped being either. "Get the box," Ethan said. His voice had stopped shaking. It had gone somewhere past shaking, somewhere quiet and total, and certain, the voice of a man who fixes broken things and had just found the one thing in the world he would tear the whole house down to fix. "Get the box and get in the truck. He wants a trade." Claire was already moving. "Then we're going to give him the worst day of his life." The truck was already moving before Claire had the box in her lap, and Ethan's hands on the wheel were steadier than any part of Claire felt. "Call him," Ethan said. "Right now, speaker." He said don't tell me. He didn't say don't call, and that plan died the second he took my kid." His eyes never left the road. "Call him. And Claire, let me hear his voice. I need to hear his voice." Her fingers were shaking so badly she misdialed twice. On the third try, it rang once, and Marcus answered like he'd been holding the phone in his hand. "There she is." "Where is she?" It wasn't Claire who said it. It was Ethan low and flat, and Claire watched something happen on the other end of that line. A half-second pause, the sound of a man recalibrating. "Ah, the construction fellow. I'm on speaker. She told you." Marcus clicked his tongue. "Claire, I gave you one instruction. Where is my daughter?" Ethan said again, and this time there was something under the flatness. Something Claire had never heard from him, a thing with teeth. "She's fine," Marcus said, and the awful thing was that he sounded almost sincere. "She's completely fine. She's sitting in a very nice car eating a very expensive cookie, and she thinks she's on a surprise trip her daddy arranged. I haven't laid a finger on her, and I'm not going to because I'm not a monster, whatever Claire's told you. I'm a businessman with a leverage problem, and your daughter is the solution to my leverage problem, and the second my problem is solved, she goes home. That's it. That's the whole thing. You said butterfly pancakes." Ethan's voice cracked on it just slightly, and Claire's heart broke down the middle. "You've been listening to my house." "I've been listening to a lot of houses. It's how I stay ahead of expensive surprises." A pause. "That one was, I'll admit that one was useful. The little girl talks about her late mother when she thinks the right person's listening. Very moving. Very exploitable. You should teach her to be more careful. Someone worse than me could have used it." Claire watched Ethan's knuckles go white, and then deliberately loosen. He breathed. She could see him deciding in real time not to give Marcus the thing Marcus wanted, which was a scared man. "Here's the trade," Ethan said. "All of it. Every copy. We bring it to you wherever you want, and we walk away with my daughter. You never see either of us again. That's what you want. Let's do it clean." "See, now you're being sensible." Marcus sounded delighted. "There's a rest area off the highway exit 44, the closed one with the boarded-up building. Nobody there. You'll come, you'll bring everything. Claire will bring the drive, and we'll make our little exchange like grown-ups. 6 o'clock. You come alone, the two of you. Nobody else. No lawyers, no clever friends. And God help you, no police, because I will see them coming from a mile out there. That's rather the point of choosing it." His voice hardened. "And if I see one thing I don't like, one badge, one extra car, I get back on the highway, and your daughter goes with me, and you spend the next 10 years wondering, are we clear?" "We're clear." "Good. Oh, and construction fellow." "What?" "She'll tell you this is her fault. On the drive over. She'll spiral. She does that. She'll try to take all of it onto herself so you'll be angry at her instead of scared for the girl. Don't let her. I need her thinking straight at 6. The smile came back into his voice, obscene now. "See, I'm helping. I've always taken good care of her." The line went dead. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The truck ate the highway. And then, Claire, exactly as predicted, opened her mouth to say, "This is my fault," and Ethan reached over without looking and put his hand flat on her knee. "Don't," he said. "He told me you would, so don't. He doesn't get to be right about you. Not today." Claire closed her mouth. She looked at his hand on her knee. This man she'd known for a handful of weeks, who was driving toward a boarded-up rest area to trade the only thing keeping him safe for a little girl who wasn't even his by blood. Except she was. Claire realized she was his by every measure that counted. And something in Claire's chest that had been cracked open for 2 years finally fully broke, and what came out of it wasn't guilt. It was rage. Clean and useful. "He's not getting the drive?" she said. "Claire, listen to me. You said it yourself this morning in the grass. You make the drive worthless to steal, and he has no reason to come. So we make it worthless. But we don't give him nothing because he's got Lily, and he needs to think he won." She was talking fast now, the therapist in her, the woman who used to do the real books at night. The sharp mind Marcus had spent 11 years telling her didn't exist. "We give him a drive, just not that drive." Ethan's eyes flicked to her, then back to the road. "Keep talking. He's never actually seen the files. He knows they exist because he knows what I took, but he's never watched me open them. He doesn't know the folder structure, the file names, none of it. If I put an encrypted drive in his hand, password protected the way I'd actually protect something that mattered, he can't check it in a parking lot. He can't plug it into anything at exit 44. He takes it on faith because it looks right and it's locked the way the real one would be locked. By the time he gets it to someone who can open it and finds it's garbage, Lily's home and we're gone. Ethan finished. His jaw worked. And the real one's already with your lawyer. The real one's already with my lawyer, Claire said. We stop and make a copy for her right now on the way. Then the real drive goes to her office in a sealed envelope before 6 o'clock. So even if the whole thing goes wrong, even if he figures it out, even if whatever happens to us, it's already out. It's already past him. He can't unring it. Ethan was quiet for a mile. Then, you did the real books at night, on the laptop, because he trusted you and not the accountants. Yeah. He spent 11 years telling you you weren't smart enough to have an opinion. Ethan almost smiled, and it was a terrible smile, and Claire loved it. He's about to find out what happens when the smartest person in the room finally stops agreeing to be the dumbest. They made 2 stops. The first was a drugstore parking lot where Claire, hands finally steady because they had a job to do, spent 9 minutes on a cheap laptop she kept in the truck bed toolbox, copying the real files to a fresh drive for the lawyer and building the decoy. A second drive encrypted with a password. Marcus would never guess, filled with folders that looked exactly like the real thing from the outside and contained nothing but junk. She named the folders the way a paranoid person names folders. She made it look loved. She made it look like the most protected object in the world. How do you know he won't just open the real one later and wait? Ethan caught it. He never gets the real one, right? He never gets the real one. He gets this. And he can't tell the difference until he's somewhere with time and an expert. And by then it doesn't matter because Lily's home. Because Lily's home. The second stop was a law office in a strip mall, and Claire ran in with a sealed envelope while Ethan idled at the curb, watching every car in the lot like it might come alive. She was inside for 4 minutes. When she came back out, she had a different look on her face, and she climbed into the truck and said, "She's not just my divorce lawyer. I never told you her whole thing. Before she did family law, she was a federal prosecutor, white collar. She's been waiting 2 years for me to be ready to do this. She has people she can call." She said, Claire's voice caught. She said if I bring her the drive, this stops being me hiding from him. It starts being them hunting him. Then, it's already started, Ethan said. It's in her hands. Whatever happens at 6, it's already started. He pulled out of the lot. 40 minutes to exit 44. Claire watched the mile markers count down and felt the thing she'd been dreading crawl back up her throat. Because there was one piece of the plan they hadn't said out loud, the piece that mattered most. The piece that no clever drive could solve. Ethan, what if he doesn't hand her over? What if he takes the drive and keeps her anyway? What if the whole trade is... I know. You have to have thought about it. I've thought about nothing else since the school. His hands flexed on the wheel. A man who will take a kid to solve a leverage problem isn't a man who keeps his word for its own sake. He keeps it when keeping it costs him less than breaking it. So we make breaking it cost him everything. How? Ethan was quiet. Then he told her the rest of the plan, the part he hadn't said, the part that made Claire's blood run cold, and then slowly made her sit up straighter. Because it wasn't just a decoy drive. It was a decoy drive plus one phone call Claire hadn't known he'd made from the drugstore, while she was building the fake one phone call to a woman with a plain business card who'd said, "I've worked for that man 6 years, and I'll deny I said it and get it to the right people fast." "You called Diane Foss," Claire breathed. "You gave me the number. It was on the card." Ethan's eyes stayed on the road. "I told her where we're meeting and when. I told her Marcus took a little girl. I told her that a man who does that leaves the people who work for him holding a very different kind of folder than the one they signed up for. And I asked her one question." "What question?" "I asked her whether, when this all comes apart, and it's coming apart, Claire, your prosecutor's already dialing, whether she wanted to be standing next to Marcus, when it did, or standing across from him." He finally glanced at her. She hung up. Didn't answer. But she didn't say no. Claire pressed her hand to her mouth. She thought about the woman at her door, the small change in her stillness at the word lawyer, the off-the-record warning. The plane card slid under the door by a person who'd spent 6 years telling herself she wasn't part of it. "She'll come," Claire said. "Or she won't. But you gave her the door." "I gave her the door. It's the only thing you can ever really give anybody." Ethan's voice roughened. "Somebody left a light on for me once. Few weeks ago. I locked it off and she turned it back on. Turns out, that matters more than I knew." Exit 44 came up out of the flat afternoon, and Ethan took it, and the road narrowed, and the buildings fell away. And there it was, the boarded-up rest area, the cracked lot, and in the middle of it, gleaming and obscene, the black car. And Ethan Carter, 40 feet out, saw his daughter's face in the back window and made a sound Claire had never heard a grown man make. "She's there. She's Claire. She's right there. She's okay. She's—" "Ethan, breathe. We stick to it. Breathe." He breathed. He pulled the truck to a stop 30 feet from the black car and put it in park, and sat for 1 second with both hands on the wheel, doing the thing he did, gathering himself, becoming the flat, calm man. And then he looked at Claire and said, "You do the talking about the drive. I do the talking about her. We don't get between him and the highway. We keep it slow. Ready." "No." "Me neither. Let's go." They got out. Marcus was already leaning against the black car, hands in his coat pockets, relaxed as a man waiting for coffee. Behind the tinted glass, small and blurred, Lily's face pressed to the window, and Claire saw the exact moment the little girl recognized her father, saw her mouth make the word Dad through the glass, saw her small hand come up flat against it, and saw Ethan's whole body strain toward the car like something on a chain. Ah, Marcus said pleasantly. "Slow. We talked about slow. Drive first." "Kid first," Ethan said. "Drive first and then we all relax." Marcus pushed off the car. "Claire, you brought it." Claire held up the fireproof box. Her hands did not shake. She was almost surprised. 2 years of shaking, and now with everything on the line, with the little girl's hand flat on the glass, her hands were dead steady. "Every copy," she said. "It's all here. The original and the 2 backups. Locked the way I keep it. You take it, we take her, and you never see any of us again." "See, that's a lie, because I'll see the backups exist and wonder about the 3rd one." Marcus smiled. "But I've decided to be generous about the 3rd one. Because frankly, once I have the originals, a lonely copy in some cloud somewhere is worthless without the woman willing to testify to what it is. And you're not going to testify, are you, Claire? Because testifying means admitting you did the books. Testifying means your name in the story. You've spent 2 years running from your name in the story. You're not going to walk into a courtroom and put it there yourself." And this was the moment Marcus won, or thought he did, because he watched Claire's face for the flinch, the old flinch, the 11 years trained flinch of a woman who agreed she was the guilty one. It didn't come. Instead, Claire said quietly, "I already did." Marcus's smile paused. "The drive's already with a federal prosecutor," Claire said. "Went in a sealed envelope 40 minutes ago. She used to try white-collar cases. She's been waiting 2 years for me to be brave enough to hand it to her, and today I was, because you took a child. And it turns out the thing I couldn't do to save myself, I could do in about 4 minutes to save her." She held up the box. "This isn't the evidence anymore, Marcus. The evidence is gone. It's past you. This is just the thing you have to take, so I can get that little girl out of your car. So take it, and let's find out whether you're a man who keeps his word, or a man who's about to add kidnapping to a case that's already being built with your name all over it." For 1 full second, exit 44 was completely silent. And then Marcus laughed, but it was a different laugh. Thinner, and Claire heard the crack in it. Heard the first note of a man realizing the floor he'd been standing on had been quietly sawn through beneath him, and she thought, there it is. "There's the sound you've been making me make for 11 years. How does it feel?" "You're bluffing," Marcus said. "You spent 11 years telling me I wasn't smart enough to do anything you didn't tell me to do," Claire said. "Ask yourself if a stupid woman thought of that. Or if you just needed me to be stupid because the alternative was terrifying." Marcus's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked just once to the highway, and Claire saw him do the math. Saw him weigh keeping the girl against a federal prosecutor who might already have the files. Saw him realize that if she was telling the truth, holding an 8-year-old made everything infinitely worse, and if she was bluffing, he lost nothing by letting the girl go and taking the drive. Saw him arrive at the only rational answer. "Fine," Marcus said, and pushed off the car. "The girl for the box, and Claire, if you're lying about the prosecutor, I'll know by tomorrow, and I'll be back, and there won't be a trade next time." He reached for the back door handle. And that was the moment it went wrong. Because a second car came off the highway. Ethan saw it. First headlights turning in tires on the cracked lot, and his whole plan flashed in front of him. No police, no extra cars. "I'll get back on the highway, and your daughter goes with me." And Marcus saw it too, and Marcus's hand closed hard on the door handle, and his face went from smooth to something ugly and cornered in a single breath. "You called somebody," Marcus snarled, all the charm gone now, the real Marcus, the wall builder, the cold flat thing underneath. "You called somebody, you stupid?" And he wrenched the back door open and lunged half into the car, reaching for Lily. And Ethan was already moving 30 feet, closing to 2010, and Claire was screaming Lily's name, and the second car skidded to a stop and its door flew open, and it was Diane Foss, alone. No badge, no police, just a woman in a good coat who'd spent 6 years telling herself she wasn't part of it. Standing in the door of her own car with a phone held up in front of her recording, and she said in a voice that carried clean across the whole cracked lot, "Marcus, stop. It's already sent." She didn't lower the phone. "The transfer records, the shell company signatures, the offshore routing, everything I've been holding for 6 years in case I ever needed to not go down with you. I just sent all of it to the same prosecutor she did, 2 minutes ago, from my car." Her voice shook, but the phone didn't. "It's over. It was over the second you decided a little girl was leverage. I am not doing that. I am not being the person who was standing next to you when they show the tape of you pulling a child out of a car. I'm done, Marcus. I'm out. And so are you." Marcus froze half inside the car, one hand on the doorframe, and Claire watched the whole architecture of the man collapse in real time. Watched him understand that it wasn't one witness anymore. It was two, that the woman he trusted and the woman he controlled had both on the same afternoon in the same hour stopped being things he owned. In the frozen half-second, while Marcus stood suspended between the child and the highway, Ethan crossed the last 10 feet. He didn't hit him. Claire would tell that part 100 times later, and it would always be the part people didn't believe, that a father with every reason, with a decade of another man's cruelty standing in front of him, did not throw a single punch. He just reached past Marcus into the car, unbuckled his daughter, with hands that had gone impossibly gentle, and lifted Lily out and into his own chest, and turned his back on Marcus Reed completely, which was somehow the most violent thing he could have done, turning his back, treating the man like weather, like something already gone. "Dad!" Lily was sobbing into his neck. "Dad, the man said you sent him. He had the pancake word. He had our word." "I know, baby. I know. He didn't. I'm here. You're okay. You're okay." Ethan's voice broke on every word and held anyway. "I've got you. Nobody's ever using our word again. That was Mom's word, and it's ours, and I'm changing it tonight, and you're picking the new one, okay? You're picking it. You're okay." And Marcus cornered, exposed, recorded, sent, finished. Did the only thing men like Marcus have ever done when the wall finally falls on them. He got in his car. He didn't slam the door. Even now he closed it soft, the reflex of a man sure he could open it again, except this time everyone in the lot knew he couldn't. The black car pulled out onto the highway silent as it came, and Diane Foss lowered her phone at last, and put a hand over her mouth, and started very quietly to cry 6 years of it all at once, in a cracked parking lot at exit 44. Claire went to her. She didn't decide to. She just crossed the lot and put her arms around a woman she'd met once through a locked door, and Diane held on the way. Claire had held on to Ethan that morning, the way drowning people hold on to the first solid thing. "You came," Claire said. "He took a child." Diane said, wrecked. 6 years I told myself it was just paperwork, just numbers, just a job. And then he took a child, and I couldn't. There's no version of the story where I'm holding the folder for that. There just isn't. She pulled back, wiped her face. Is she okay? The little girl. Claire looked over at Ethan 30 feet away, sitting now on the tailgate of his truck with Lily wrapped around him like she'd never let go, his face pressed into her hair, both of them shaking, both of them whole. She's okay, Claire said. She's home. The drive back was slow and quiet and full. Lily fell asleep between them on the bench seat within 10 minutes, wrung out, one hand fisted in her father's sleeve, even in sleep. And Ethan drove the speed limit for the first time all day, with his kid's head against his ribs, and Claire's hand resting quiet on the box that didn't matter anymore. Diane's going to call her lawyer tonight, Claire said softly. And the prosecutor's going to call in the morning, and there are going to be statements, and my name's going to be in it, and it's going to be a long, ugly thing, Ethan. It doesn't end today. You know that. I know. He's going to fight. Men like him always have more lawyers than sense. Let him fight lawyers. He's not fighting us anymore. Ethan glanced down at his sleeping daughter, then over at Claire. You did the thing today. The thing you couldn't do for 2 years. You put your name in the story. To save her, not myself. That's how it always works. Ethan's voice was rough with everything the day had been. Nobody ever gets brave for their own sake. You get brave for the person in the back seat. Then one day you look up and you're just a brave person. And you can't figure out when it happened. He was quiet a moment. I stopped fixing my own house for 3 years, fixed everybody else's. Then a woman moved in next door and set up a trampoline for a kid who wasn't hers. And I got in a truck today and drove to a rest area to trade the only leverage I had for a little girl, and I didn't even think about it. That's you. You did that. You moved in next to a locked-up man and left a light on. Claire looked out the window at the mile markers going by in the last of the afternoon, and she thought about Marcus's voice on the phone that morning. She'll try to take all of it onto herself, so you'll be angry at her instead of scared for the girl. Don't let her. And she realized he'd been right about her, right about the pattern, right about everything except the one thing that mattered, which was that this time there'd been someone in the truck who wouldn't let her. Ethan. Yeah. When we get home, can I? She stopped, started again, and it came out smaller and more honest than anything she'd said all day. I don't want to sleep in that house tonight, not alone. Not with the fireproof box in the closet, and I keep seeing the black car in the driveway even though it's gone. Can Lily and I? You're staying with us, Ethan said before she finished. Both of you. I already decided that an hour ago. There's a guest room, and there's a couch, and there's a locked door, and there's me, and nobody in that house sleeps alone tonight. He reached over the sleeping child between them and found Claire's hand and held it. That's not a big romantic thing. That's what you do. Somebody's scared you leave a light on. You taught me that. Claire held his hand over the top of his sleeping daughter's head, the three of them in one truck on one highway going home. And for the first time in 11 years, she understood the difference all the way down to the bottom. The difference between a man who provided and a man who protected, between being cared for and being controlled, between a house someone owns and a home someone builds. And when they pulled into the quiet street just after dark, the porch light was already on. Both of them. Because Ethan had wired a switch into her porch weeks ago, back when he was still pretending he was only being neighborly. And now his own house and her house glowed side by side in the Denver dark. 2 lights on one street. And Lily woke up just enough to look at them and mumble, "How come both houses are on?" And Ethan said, "Because from now on it's kind of one house." And Lily said, "Okay," the way kids say, "okay," to the most enormous things, and went back to sleep. Claire sat in the truck a moment longer, looking at the 2 lit porches, and let herself believe it. It wasn't over. She knew it wasn't over. There were prosecutors and statements, and a man with too many lawyers who wasn't going to go quietly. Tomorrow the phones would ring, and the long, ugly machinery of consequences would start grinding, and her name would go into the story, and it would be hard. But tonight there were 2 lights on, and a sleeping child between 2 people who'd have burned the world down for her, and a locked door and each other. and that Claire finally understood was the whole thing. That was what she'd been running toward the whole time she thought she was just running away. The phone rang at 7:02 the next morning, and Claire knew before she picked it up that the easy part was over. She'd slept in Ethan's guest room with Lily curled against her because the little girl had refused to sleep alone, and Ethan hadn't argued, and Claire had lain awake half the night listening to a child breathe and thinking, this is what I ran toward. Now on the second ring, she saw the name on the screen, Rachel Okafor, her lawyer, the former prosecutor, and her stomach dropped through the floor. Rachel. You're awake. Good. Are you sitting down? Should I be? You should be, and you should have coffee, and you should have that neighbor of yours in the room, because from this second forward, you don't make a single decision about this without a witness and a record. Rachel's voice was crisp awake, the voice of a woman who'd clearly been up all night. Claire, I've been on the phone since 5 a.m. What you and the Foss woman handed me, I need you to understand the size of it. This isn't a divorce anymore. This isn't even one crime. Marcus Reed didn't just skim a housing project. The routing in those files touches 3 cities and 2 states. And there's a name in the shell structure that made a federal friend of mine actually gasp on the phone at 5:40 in the morning. And I have not heard that man gasp in 20 years. Claire sat down. What name? I'm not saying it on a cell phone, but it means this stopped being your case last night. It's federal now. There's a U.S. Attorney's Office that has wanted a reason to look at Marcus Reed's paper for 3 years and never had a witness on the inside. Now they have 2. You and Diane. A pause. You understand what that makes you. A target, a witness, a protected one. But yes, also a target, because the second Marcus's lawyers understand what's coming, he's going to do everything a very rich, very cornered man does, and I need you braced for all of it. Rachel's voice softened 1 degree. The good news first. The child pick up the school, the password, the recording Diane made in the lot, that's not white collar anymore. That's a child. Prosecutors move mountains for a child. That recording is the reason a U.S. attorney is awake on a Saturday. Marcus made the one mistake even his lawyers can't paper over. He put his hands on a little girl in front of a camera. Claire looked up. Ethan was standing in the doorway, coffee in hand, having heard enough to go still. She put the phone on speaker and set it on the nightstand between them. Rachel, Ethan's here. Good, Mr. Carter. I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear it as fact, not comfort. What you two did yesterday was reckless, and it worked. And if it had gone 1 degree differently, I'd be having a very different phone call right now. So please, both of you, no more parking lots. From here, it's paperwork and subpoenas, and men in suits. And that is exactly how you want it, because that's a war. Marcus can't win with a black car. Understood, Ethan said. The bad news. Rachel went on, and her voice dropped. He's going to come at Claire's credibility first, because it's his only move. He's going to say she did the books. He's going to say she's an accomplice trying to save herself. He's going to say she stole the drive out of spite over the divorce and doctored it. And Claire? A beat. Some of that has a shape a jury might believe if we're not careful. You did type the numbers. That's real. We don't hide from it. We get in front of it. Which means the first thing that happens today is you come to my office and you tell me everything every night on that laptop, every transfer you didn't understand, and everyone you did, and we build the true version before he builds the false one. Claire's throat tightened. The version where I'm not innocent. The version where you're a human being who was controlled and afraid and finally did the right thing at real cost. Juries understand that better than innocence, Claire. Innocence is boring. Redemption is unforgettable. Rachel exhaled. 9 o'clock. My office. Bring the neighbor if you want. He's good for you, but he waits in the lobby for the confidential part. And Claire, one more thing, and then I have to go. What? Diane Foss called me an hour ago. She's terrified. She's got no protection, no lawyer, and she just handed the government 6 years of a dangerous man's secrets to save your daughters. Sorry, the little girl off her own bat with nothing in it for her but a clear conscience and a target on her back. Rachel paused. You two owe that woman. Not money. Standing. She needs a lawyer today, and she can't afford mine, and I think you should ask yourself what kind of people you want to be to the woman who drove to that lot alone. The line went quiet a moment. We'll take care of her, Claire said, and Ethan nodded before Claire had finished the sentence, and Rachel said, good, and was gone. They sat in the gray morning light with the phone dark between them. Down the hall, Lily was still asleep, and Claire felt the whole enormous weight of what came next settle onto her shoulders. The office, the confessions, the credibility fight, the men in suits, the long grinding machinery, and for 1 second the old instinct rose up, the 2-year instinct run. Disappear, new city, new name, don't drag these people through it. Ethan saw it on her face. He always saw it. No, he said. I didn't say anything. You did the thing with your jaw. The run thing. I know the run thing. I invented the run thing. He set his coffee down and took both her hands. You're not disappearing. Not because you can't. Because you don't want to, and you're allowed to want to stay somewhere. That's the whole thing you've been learning. You're allowed to want to stay. Claire's eyes filled. It's going to be so ugly, Ethan. My name in it. The books. Him telling a courtroom I'm exactly what he always said I was. And Lily, she's going to be in the middle of a thing that's not even hers because he used her. And every time I look at her, I'm going to know it's because of me she was in that car. She was in that car because a bad man put her there, not you. Ethan's grip tightened. And you want to talk about Lily. Yesterday, my daughter watched 2 women who'd been made small their whole lives stand up in a parking lot and take down a man with more money than God using nothing but the truth and a phone. You think that hurt her, Claire? That's the best thing she's ever going to see. That's the thing she's going to remember when someone tries to make her small someday. My daughter watched you refuse to disappear. Let her keep watching. And that let her keep watching was what got Claire up off the bed. The lawyer's office at 9 was the beginning of a season that lasted months, and the story stopped being a single afternoon and became a slow war. But Claire never once forgot the shape of that first morning, the run instinct, and the man who wouldn't let her. They took care of Diane. That was the first thing, and it turned out to matter more than any of them knew. Ethan called a lawyer he'd built a house for years back, a quiet man who owed him a favor, and by that afternoon, Diane Foss had representation and a phone number to call at 3 a.m. and a place to stay that wasn't the apartment Marcus knew about. And when Claire drove Diane to that first meeting, the 2 women sat in the car outside for 10 minutes, first not talking, and then Diane said, You know he's going to say we're lying together, that we cooked it up, the bitter ex-wife and the disgruntled employee. I know. Are you scared? Every minute, Claire said. But I've got... She stopped and it came out simpler than she meant it to. I've got people now. That's the difference. 2 years I had a drive in a fireproof box and nobody who knew about it. Now I've got a prosecutor and a lawyer and a man who wired a light onto my porch and you. He built me small by cutting me off from everybody. Turns out the whole trick to unbuilding it is just people. That's it. That's the whole secret. Diane looked at her a long moment. He did the same thing to me. 6 years. I didn't even notice I'd stopped seeing my sister. Call your sister, Claire said. Diane called her sister that night. The mini-victories came in small and strange, the way they do in a real fight instead of a movie. The U.S. Attorney's Office formally opened a case in the second week, and Rachel called it the single best Tuesday of my professional life. The pickup recording Marcus with his hand on the car door. Lily's face at the glass got Marcus charged before the financial case had even finished being built, because Rachel was right. The machinery moved mountains for a child. Marcus posted bail so fast and so high that the number made the local news, and Claire watched the coverage from Ethan's couch with Lily doing homework at the kitchen table and thought, there's your name in the story, Marcus. Not mine, yours. But it wasn't clean and it wasn't fast, and there were nights it nearly broke them. The worst one came in the second month. Marcus's lawyers filed something Claire never fully understood the legal name for it. some motion, some maneuver that dragged the divorce back into the criminal case, and turned the whole thing into a story about a vindictive woman who'd stolen documents to destroy the husband who'd left her. It hit the local paper with a photo of Marcus looking wronged and dignified, and a photo of Claire looking in the way unflattering photos always do, exactly like the thing he wanted her to look like. And there was a line in the article, a quote from a source close to Mr. Reed, that said Claire had always been unstable and had manufactured a custody-style drama around a child that isn't even hers to weaponize the sympathy of prosecutors. Claire read it 3 times. Then she put the phone down very carefully and walked out to Ethan's backyard and stood in the dark where Lily couldn't see her and came apart. Ethan found her 10 minutes later. "He's winning," she said before he could speak. Her voice was wrecked. "Not the case is fine. Rachel says the case is fine. But this, the story. He's turning me back into her. The unstable one, the too much one, the one who weaponized a child." She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. "And the worst part, Ethan, is that a piece of me read that and thought maybe he's right. Maybe I did drag Lily into this. Maybe I am too much. Maybe 11 years wasn't him building a wall. Maybe it was him telling the truth, and I just couldn't stand to hear it. He gets in my head and I can't." She was shaking. "I can't tell anymore which voice is mine." And Ethan did the thing that Claire would spend the rest of her life being grateful for. He didn't argue. He didn't tell her she was wonderful, didn't list her virtues, didn't do the thing that would have bounced off the armor Marcus had installed in her over 11 years. He got quiet. And then he said, "Can I tell you about my wife?" Claire looked up. "I haven't. Not really. Just the car, just the fast part. But I want to tell you the rest because it's the only thing I've got that might help." He sat down on the back steps, the ones he'd built, and Claire sat next to him, and he looked out at the dark. She wasn't perfect. Everybody acts like when somebody dies they turn into a saint, and I let them for 3 years because it was easier. But she wasn't a saint. She had a temper. She left cabinets open. She'd get an idea at 11 at night and want to repaint the whole kitchen and get furious at me for being tired. She was too much Claire. By the definition Marcus would use, she was way too much. "Ethan, let me finish. She was too much, and I loved every single molecule of it, and here's the thing I need you to hear." He turned to her. "The people who tell you you're too much are always the people who are too small. That's the whole equation. Too much isn't a fact about you. It's a measurement of the container they're offering. Marcus called you too much because you didn't fit in the little box he had. My wife was too much for a smaller man than me and exactly right for me. And you," his voice cracked, "you set up a trampoline for a kid who wasn't yours, and you learned to French braid for a girl whose mother died, and you drove to a parking lot to trade your freedom for a child you'd known for 6 weeks. That's not too much, Claire. That's just more than a small man could hold. He didn't have big enough hands. That was never your problem." Claire cried then. But it was a different crying, and when it was done, something in her had shifted back into its right place, and she could tell her own voice from his again. "I don't know how you do that," she whispered. "Do what?" "Find the load-bearing thing and put your shoulder under it." She wiped her face. "You said that once, about foundations. You find the thing holding the weight and you reinforce it." "You're the thing holding the weight," Ethan said simply. "In this family. You're load-bearing. He spent 11 years telling you that you were decorative. He needed you to think that. Because the day you figure out you're structural is the day the whole thing he built falls down." He almost smiled. "Which incidentally is happening. In federal court, right now, on a schedule. Me too." The article ran and it hurt. And then it did the thing Rachel had promised. It aged badly fast. The way lies do when there's a recording and a prosecutor and a second witness who used to work for the liar. Diane Foss gave a statement that dismantled the unstable ex-wife story in about 4 sentences, because it's hard to call a woman a vindictive fabricator when the man's own senior employee of 6 years is sitting next to her saying, "No, it happened." I watched it happen. Here's the paper. Two witnesses who couldn't be dismissed as one bitter woman. Rachel had said it in the parking lot metaphor, and now it was true in a courtroom. Diane made Claire unlie aboutable. There was a twist in the third month that Claire never saw coming, and it broke her heart in a way she wasn't prepared for. Marcus's mother called her. Claire almost didn't answer the unknown number. She'd stopped answering unknown numbers, but something made her, and a thin old voice said, "Is this Claire that was married to my son?" And Claire's whole body went cold. "Mrs. Reed, I'm not calling to yell at you. I know that's what you're braced for. I can hear it in how you said my name." A long pause, an old woman gathering herself. "I'm calling because I read the things they're saying about you in the paper. The unstable business, the weaponizing a child business, and I wanted a person who actually knows to tell you something." Another pause. Marcus's father was exactly like him. Exactly. And for 40 years, I let that man tell me what I was, and I believed every word, and I raised a boy watching me believe it, and that's how you make a Marcus. You make one by letting a little boy watch his mother agree she's nothing. The old voice shook. "I'm 81 years old, and I'm calling a woman I was told to hate to say don't do what I did. Don't let him tell you what you are. I did it for 40 years, and it cost me a son because I taught him it works. You getting out? You fighting Claire? When I read that you drove to that parking lot for a child that wasn't yours, I sat in my kitchen and I cried because I never once did anything like that. I never once refused him anything. You did in 6 weeks what I couldn't do in 40 years. A breath. So you fight him. You fight my son with everything you have. It's the only thing that might. It's too late for me to fix him, but it's not too late for it to mean something. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Claire was crying so hard she could barely speak. "I understand. Take care of that little girl. And that man who fixes things. Marcus never fixed a thing in his life, only bought them and broke them. If you've got a man who fixes things, you hold on to him." A pause. "I have to go. I won't call again. But I wanted one person in this to hear an old woman say, 'You're not too much. You were exactly enough.' He just never had the hands to hold it." She hung up. Claire sat with the dead phone for a long time. When Ethan came in and found her, she couldn't explain it at first, and then she told him all of it, the 81-year-old voice, and the 40 years. "And you're not too much. You were exactly enough," which was almost word for word what Ethan had said on the back steps. And Ethan went very still and said, "Two people who know him best, his mother and his employee, both told you the same thing, both risked something to tell you." He shook his head slowly. "Claire, when the people who have every reason to protect him instead cross the room to warn you, that's not a coincidence. That's a verdict. That's the whole world telling you which version was true." The case ground forward. There were depositions where Claire sat across a table from Marcus's lawyers for 6 hours and did not break, because every time she felt the old smallness rise, she thought about an 81-year-old woman crying in a kitchen, and she straightened her spine. There was a day Diane and Claire testified in the same proceeding, and afterwards sat in a diner and laughed, actually laughed, the loud kind, and Claire realized she was building the thing she'd never had in 11 years of marriage, a friend who knew the worst of it and stayed. And there was Lily. Because through all of it, there was an 8-year-old girl who'd been in a black car, and Claire never let a single day of the war make her forget it. They got Lily a counselor. They changed the family password. Lily picked dinosaur waffles, an upgrade on butterfly pancakes that made Ethan laugh until he cried the night she chose it. And slowly, the thing that could have broken a child instead did the opposite because Lily got to watch. She got to watch the bad man face consequences. She got to watch two brave women in a courtroom. She got to watch her father stand steady and her almost stepmother refuse to run. And one night, months in, Lily said something at the dinner table that stopped both adults cold. "When I grow up," Lily announced around a mouthful of dinosaur waffles that they now had for dinner sometimes, because why not? "I'm going to be like Claire and Miss Diane. I'm going to be a person who tells the truth even when a scary man doesn't want me to." Claire put her fork down. Ethan reached under the table and found Claire's hand. "That's exactly who you're going to be," Claire said, and her voice only barely held. "And it's the bravest thing a person can be. Braver than fighting, braver than running. Just telling the truth out loud when it's scary. You already know how. You told me about your mom that day with the glitter, remember? When your dad was standing in the doorway trying not to cry. You told the truth about somebody you loved even though it was hard. You've been brave the whole time." Lily beamed. Ethan squeezed Claire's hand so hard it almost hurt. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Claire sat on the back steps. He'd built the 2 porch lights glowing on either side of them, and Ethan said, "It's going to plea out. Rachel called while you were doing bedtime. His lawyers reached out. He's not going to trial. Too much exposure, too many witnesses, the child charge on top of the money. He's going to take a deal." Claire absorbed it. "So it's over. The scary part's over. The part where he can hurt us. There's still a lot of paper, but the black car doesn't come anymore, Claire. He's done." She sat with it. 2 years of a fireproof box, and 11 years before that of a wall built 1 brick at a time, and it ended not with a punch in a parking lot, but with a stack of paper and a man too cornered to fight. She waited to feel triumphant. What she felt instead, sitting on the steps in the double porch light, was quiet. Just quiet. The good kind. The kind she'd been chasing since the day she told a moving man she wanted a house where she could see the sunrise. "Ethan." "Yeah. The day I moved in, first day. Do you remember what I said to the mover about the couch? You said you wanted to see the sunrise and pretend you were the kind of person who gets up for it." Claire turned to look at him, startled. "You remember that? You were pretending to check your gutters. You were 40 feet away pretending you weren't listening. I remember everything from that street," Ethan said, and didn't look away. "I remember the trampoline box before it was a trampoline. I remember you fixing that couch story mid-sentence so it'd be funny. I remember thinking a person shouldn't be allowed to laugh that loud this early in the morning." He was quiet a second. "I remember thinking I'd forgotten happiness had a sound, and then you moved in next door, and I remembered." Claire didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say to that. She just leaned her head on his shoulder on the steps he'd built under the 2 lights he'd wired, and they sat there in the ordinary Denver dark, while a little girl slept safe inside a house that had become one house, and for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, neither of them was running from anything at all. The plea came through on a Thursday in the spring, and Claire found out she was free while standing in a hardware store aisle holding a can of paint. Rachel called, and Claire answered with the paint can in one hand, and Rachel said, "It's done. He signed it this morning. Federal time restitution, the works. He's not going to be a free man for a long time, and when he is, he'll be broke and disgraced and old. It's over, Claire, all of it. You can stop bracing." Claire stood in the aisle and didn't say anything for so long that Rachel said, "Claire, you still there?" "I'm here." Her voice came out strange. "I'm buying paint." "You're what?" "Paint. For the fence. Ethan's fence. The one he pretended to fix for 20 minutes the day I caught him watching me." Claire laughed, and it cracked in the middle. "We're painting it this weekend. All of us. Lily picked the color. It's a ridiculous color, Rachel. It's the wrong color for a fence. It's the best color I've ever seen." Rachel was quiet a moment. Then, in a voice that had lost all its prosecutor's edge, she said, "You know, in 20 years of doing this, I've watched 100 people win their cases. Most of them don't sound like you do right now. Most of them win, and they're still braced, still waiting for the next black car. You're standing in a hardware store buying fence paint your little girl picked out." A pause. "You didn't just get out, Claire. You got somewhere. That's the part almost nobody manages. Go paint your fence." Claire hung up and stood in the aisle and let herself understand it. It was over. Not the paperwork, there'd be paperwork for a year. Not the memory she'd flinch at black cars for the rest of her life. Probably some part of her always would. But the thing that had run her for 13 years. The wall built 1 brick at a time, and then the 2 years of running from the man who built it, the fireproof box, and the locked closet, and the map she'd handed him in a moment of reckless courage, all of it done. She'd walked into that marriage a woman who did the real books at night, and told herself she wasn't smart. She was walking out of the whole ordeal, a woman who'd taken down a developer with a federal case, standing in a hardware store, holding a can of paint the color of nothing that belonged on a fence. She bought 2 cans. Lily had been very clear that one wasn't enough. She didn't tell Ethan on the phone. She wanted to see his face. She drove home, both houses, one home, and she found him in the backyard where she'd known he'd be working on something because Ethan was always working on something that was just the shape of him. He looked up when she came through the gate and read her face in about half a second, the way he always could. "It's done," he said. "Not a question. It's done." He set down his tools. He didn't whoop or shout or lift her off the ground the way a man in a movie might. He just crossed the yard and put his arms around her and held on the way. He'd held on the day she called him home, the way he held on to things he'd decided to keep, and Claire pressed her face into his shoulder and felt 13 years drain out of her body into the ground. "You want to know the first thing I thought?" she said into his shirt. "When Rachel told me." "What?" "I thought about the fence, this fence, where you stood for 20 minutes pretending to fix a post that wasn't broken because you'd forgotten how to just talk to a person." She pulled back to look at him. "You know why you couldn't fix that post, Ethan? Because it wasn't broken. There was nothing to fix. You just needed a reason to stand near the light coming out of somebody else's yard. That's the whole story. That's how the whole thing started. A man who fixes things standing at a fence that didn't need fixing." Ethan laughed rough and real. "I'm never gonna live down that fence. Never. It's going in the toast at the wedding." The word came out before Claire fully meant it to, and it hung there in the spring air between them, and they both went still. "The wedding," Ethan repeated. Claire's heart was suddenly going very fast. "I didn't. That just came out. Forget I—" "No." He caught her hand. "Don't take it back. Don't do the run thing. I know the run thing." He was looking at her with an expression she'd never quite seen on him, something scared and certain at the same time. "I've been carrying something around in my pocket for 3 weeks. I keep not doing it because I keep thinking the timing's wrong. There's a case. There's the paper she's got enough on her wait for a clear day. And I just realized, standing here, there's never going to be a clear day. There's just going to be days, and I want them. All of them. The messy ones and the paperwork ones, and the ones where a black car drives by, and we both flinch and then remember we're okay." He was fumbling in his pocket now. "So I'm not going to do the big thing. I'm terrible at the big thing. I fix fences, I don't make speeches." And Ethan Carter, 41 years old. A man who hadn't laughed in 3 years until a woman caught him at a fence, got down on one knee. In the backyard next to the fence, they were going to paint a ridiculous color, and held up a ring that was simple and small and exactly right, and said, "I already told Lily. Weeks ago. I asked her first." "You want to know what she said?" Claire couldn't speak. She nodded. "She said, 'Dad, she basically already lives here. Is this going to change dinner?'" Ethan's eyes were wet and shining. "I said no, dinner stays the same. We still have dinosaur waffles on Fridays." And she said, "Then yes, obviously, why are you even asking me? Ask her." His voice broke. "So I'm asking you. Claire Morgan, I'm not the man who's going to fix you, and you're not the woman who saved me. We established that a long time ago on those steps. We're just 2 people who forgot happiness had a sound, and then found it in the yard next door. Marry me. Let's make it one house on the deed the way it's already been one house in every way that counts. Marry me." Claire got down on her knees in the grass, so she was level with him, so she wasn't being looked up at. So it was 2 people on the same ground, the way it had been the morning she told him the truth, and she said, "Yes. God, yes. Yes, obviously, why are you even asking? That's what your daughter said, and she was right." And then Lily, who had been watching from the kitchen window the entire time, because of course, she had came flying out the back door screaming, "She said yes! She said yes!" and crashed into both of them. And the 3 of them went down into the spring grass in a tangle. Laughing, all of them. That loud, unashamed laughing that a smaller man had once called embarrassing, and the neighborhood heard it, and the neighborhood which had watched a lonely father go quiet for 3 years, and then come back to life, smiled behind its windows. They painted the fence that weekend. It was, in fact, the wrong color. It was a bright, ridiculous, joyful blue that no reasonable person would paint a fence, and it made the whole yard look like a child had gotten hold of the world, which was the point, because a child had chosen it. Mrs. Alvarez came over to ask about it and stayed for lemonade. Diane Foss came over. Diane came over a lot. Now she'd become the kind of friend who didn't knock, and she'd started dating a paramedic and laughing again herself, and got blue paint on her good shirt and didn't care. It was the best fence in Denver. It was objectively a terrible fence. Both things were true. The wedding was small, and it was in that backyard. Claire wore something simple. Ethan wore a suit that a client had helped him pick, because he genuinely did not own one, and he was nervous in a way he hadn't been since he was a much younger man. And when Claire came out the back door of the house that was now fully legally on the deed theirs, he forgot every word he'd practiced. Lily walked Claire down the short aisle between the folding chairs which had been Lily's demand, and no one had argued. And when they reached Ethan, Lily didn't hand Claire off. She stood between them, holding one hand of each, and refused to let go, and so they did the whole ceremony as three, a little girl in the middle, and nobody could see a problem with that because there wasn't one. Rachel came. She cried, which she claimed she never did. Diane read something, not a poem. Diane said she'd rather eat glass than read a poem. So instead, she just talked for 2 minutes about what it means when a person crosses a room to warn you, and how Claire had taught her that you could be 60% of the way to becoming a bad man's shadow, and still turn around, still choose the door, still drive to the parking lot alone, and there wasn't a dry eye in the yard. And then, because Diane couldn't help herself, she said, "I do have to mention the fence." The yard laughed. For those who don't know, Diane went on delighted. This whole thing started because this man, she pointed at Ethan, stood at that fence for 20 minutes pretending to fix a post that was not by any engineering standard broken. He is a professional. He builds houses. He looked at a perfectly good fence post and decided it needed 20 minutes of attention, and the real reason was that a woman had moved in next door and started laughing loud enough to remind a grieving man that the world still had a sound in it. He couldn't say that. So he fixed a fence that didn't need fixing. Diane raised her glass. May we all be lucky enough to find the person who makes us stand at the fence, and may we all be brave enough eventually to put the hammer down and just say hello. They drank to it. Ethan was openly crying by then and had stopped pretending not to. There's a thing that happens at the end of stories like this one, where everything gets tied up too neat, where the villain is destroyed, and the couple is perfect, and the sun sets on a life without problems. That's not what happened, and Claire would have distrusted it if it had. What happened was a real life. There were still hard days. There were nights Claire woke up with her heart pounding, sure she heard a car in the driveway, and Ethan would wake up too and just say, "It's not him. You're okay. Feel my hand, that's real," until she came back to herself. There was a bad week in the second year of marriage where old grief rose up in Ethan out of nowhere. A song. A smell the anniversary. And he went quiet and far away the way he used to. And Claire had to learn that loving a widower meant sometimes standing next to a room she couldn't enter and just leaving the door open. There were arguments about money and paint colors and whether Lily was old enough for a phone. There was the ordinary grinding, beautiful friction of two whole people building one life without either of them disappearing into it, which was the thing Claire had never had, the thing Marcus had made impossible. Two people staying. Two people and choosing each other anyway, every day, on purpose. Lily grew up. That was the twist nobody warns you about, the slow one, the one that breaks your heart in the good way. The 8-year-old who'd been in a black car became a 9-year-old, then a 12-year-old, then a teenager who rolled her eyes and slammed doors, and was underneath it exactly the person she'd promised to be at that dinner table with a mouthful of waffles. She told the truth even when it was scary. She got in trouble once in high school for standing up in front of a whole class and calling out a teacher who was quietly humiliating a kid who couldn't defend himself, and when the school called Ethan and Claire and expecting them to discipline her, they sat in the office and Ethan said, "Let me get this straight. My daughter saw someone being made small, and she refused to let it happen quietly out loud in public at cost to herself." He stood up. "We're not punishing that. We spent a lot of years teaching her exactly that. If anything, I owe her ice cream." They got ice cream. And there was a day, years on, when Lily was 17 and about to leave for college, and she was cleaning out her room, and she found the old thing. The memory of the black car which she'd processed and healed from, and carried the way you carry any true thing that happened to you. She came downstairs and found Claire in the kitchen, and stood in the doorway the way she used to, and said, "Can I ask you something I never asked?" Anything. That day, the parking lot. You had the drive all ready with the lawyer. You didn't have to show up. You could have just let the lawyers handle it, kept yourself safe, let the case take him down without ever standing in that lot where he could have hurt you. Lily's voice was careful. "Why'd you come? You'd known me 6 weeks. I wasn't even yours yet. Why'd you get in the truck?" Claire put down the dish she was drying. She'd known this question would come someday, and she'd known exactly how she'd answer it, because it was the truest thing she knew. "Because your dad got in the truck," Claire said. "And I finally understood watching him do it that that's what love actually is. It's not the big feeling. Everybody thinks it's the big feeling. It's not." She looked at the young woman her daughter had become. "It's who gets in the truck. That's the whole test. When it's dangerous, and it costs you everything, and there's a clean, safe exit right there, and you don't take it, who gets in the truck for you?" Marcus never once got in the truck for anybody in his life. Your dad got in the truck for a little girl. I got in the truck for you. And the reason you're going to be okay out there in the world, the reason I'm not scared to let you go, is that I watched you grow up understanding it. You're going to be a person who gets in the truck. I'd bet my life on it. I basically already did. Glee. Lily crossed the kitchen and hugged her, this tall, almost grown person who'd once had glitter on her hands, telling a stranger about her mother, and said into Claire's shoulder, "You're my mom, not instead of her. I know the difference, but you're also my mom. I don't think I ever said it plain." "You didn't have to," Claire said, holding on. "But I'm glad you did." Ethan found them like that when he came in from the yard. 2 women crying in the kitchen. And he didn't ask what about. He just came and put his arms around both of them. Because after all these years, he knew that some crying didn't need fixing. Some crying was just the overflow of a life that had turned out against every odd to be full. That night, after Lily had gone up to finish packing, Ethan and Claire sat on the back steps. The same steps he'd never replaced them. He refused to. They were load-bearing in more ways than one. Under the porch lights that still burned on both houses, even though it had been one house for years, and Claire leaned her head on his shoulder the way she had 1,000 times. "She's going to be okay," Ethan said. "Out there. She's going to be okay. She's going to be better than okay. She's going to be the person other people's kids grow up telling stories about." Claire smiled into the dark. The truth teller. The one who gets in the truck. They were quiet a while. The neighborhood was asleep. Somewhere a dog barked and stopped. The blue fence faded now, but still ridiculous. Still the best fence in Denver, caught a little of the light. "You ever think about it?" Claire asked. "How close we came to not having any of this, if you'd stayed inside that day. If I'd never caught you at the fence. If either of us had done the safe thing even once." "Every day," Ethan said. "I think about it every day. It's why I never fix those steps and never will. It's why the fence stays that stupid color. They're the evidence." He turned to look at her. "Some people go their whole lives and never get the second one, Claire. The second chance. I had one wife I loved and lost, and I made peace a long time ago with the idea that was my whole allotment. One great love, and then just raising Lily and fixing other people's houses until I got old. I'd accepted it. I wasn't even sad about it anymore. I was just done. And then a woman moved in next door and set up a trampoline and laughed too loud on a Saturday morning, and I stood at a fence that didn't need fixing and everything I'd accepted turned out to be wrong." His voice was thick. "You don't get a second great love because you deserve it. Nobody deserves it. You get it because one day it moves in next door and it's brave enough to catch you looking, and you're brave enough finally barely to put the hammer down. That's the whole thing. That's the only wisdom I've got after all these years. Put the hammer down, say hello, get in the truck." Claire took his hand, the rough, warm, calloused hand that had fixed 1,000 broken things and one broken family, and held it, and looked out at the blue fence and the double lights and the ordinary Denver dark that had become the setting of the only life she'd ever actually wanted. She'd spent 13 years being told what she was. Too much, too loud, too emotional, decorative not structural. A woman who needed permission to exist. She'd believed it so long and so deep that even after she got out, even after the parking lot, even after the plea and the wedding and the years of proof, some small part of her had kept waiting for the day someone would prove the old voice right. That day never came. It was never going to come. She understood that fully now in a way she finally believed all the way to the bottom. Because you find out what a person is by what they do when it's hard and dangerous, and there's a clean way out. And Claire Morgan had gotten in the truck. She'd handed her name to a prosecutor to save a child who wasn't hers. She'd crossed a room to hold a crying stranger who'd become her closest friend. She'd married a man who fixed things and become herself the load-bearing wall of a family that would outlast every lie Marcus Reed had ever told about her. She wasn't too much. She'd been exactly enough the entire time. The world just hadn't had hands big enough to hold her until she built a family that did. And sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with a grand gesture. Sometimes they begin with a woman moving in next door, and a man who forgot how to be a person standing at a fence that didn't need fixing, and a simple joke over the top of it that neither of them knew was the beginning of everything. He'd once joked, half terrified, 3 weeks after they met, "Will you marry me?" And she'd said nothing at all, and taken his hand, and led him up the porch steps into the light. She hadn't needed to answer that day. She'd spent the rest of her life answering it instead.